She was shot defending her home. The cowboy held her hand and saved her life. Emma lived in a small town, surrounded by endless plains and rolling hills. Her house was modest but cozy, a little wooden home with a white fence that had seen many years of sun and rain. Flowers grew along the edges of the yard, and she loved to spend her mornings tending them. The roses were her favorite. Every spring, she would kneel in the soil, planting new buds and trimming the old branches carefully, imagining them as a part of her own family. Each flower seemed to tell a story, and she found comfort in their gentle presence. Life had always been simple for Emma. She wasn't rich, nor did she want to be. The townspeople knew her as quiet but strong. She had lived alone for a few years after her parents had passed, and she had grown used to the rhythms of solitude. She would wake up early, make herself a warm cup of coffee, and listen to the birds singing outside. On some days she would sit on the porch with a book, letting the wind brush against her face, and on others she would take long walks through the fields, letting her mind wander and her thoughts settle. It was peaceful, and she had learned to love it. Her neighbors were friendly, though they kept their distance. Emma appreciated that. She liked knowing people were around if she needed them, but she also valued her privacy. In her heart, she felt that her home was her sanctuary, a place where she could feel safe, a place that belonged entirely to her, and she had worked hard to keep it that way. She fixed broken fences herself, painted the walls when they started to fade, and even repaired the small roof of the barn out back. Every nail and brushstroke felt like a statement. This was her home, and she would protect it. Evenings were Emma's favorite. As the sun began to dip behind the distant hills, the sky would turn into a canvas of orange, pink, and purple. She would stand on her porch, sipping tea, and watch the light slowly fade into night. Sometimes she imagined she could see the stars blink awake one by one, as if they were greeting her personally. She liked to believe that each star carried a small wish, a hope, or a memory, and she would often whisper a quiet good night to them. It was a small ritual, but it made her feel connected to the world beyond her little town. One evening, after finishing her dinner, Emma was sitting in her favorite chair by the window, her cat curled up on her lap. The room was quiet except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and the occasional creak of the old wooden floorboards. She was thinking about the week ahead, the chores she would do in the garden, and the letters she needed to send to a friend. Everything felt normal, calm, and safe. But then, a sharp, unexpected sound broke through the stillness, a knock at the door. At first, she thought it was the wind, as it sometimes rattled the windows and made the old house groan. But then she heard it again. A firm, insistent knock, louder this time. Her heart gave a small jolt. Visitors were rare in her town, especially at this hour. She rose slowly, her hand brushing the cat that had jumped down from her lap. She walked to the door and peered through the small glass window. Outside, the porch light cast shadows on the steps, and for a moment she saw nothing but darkness. Then she noticed a figure standing there, a stranger. Emma didn't recognize him. He was tall, wearing a jacket that looked worn from travel, and his face was partly hidden under a hat. He didn't speak, just stood there, staring at her with eyes that seemed both calm and dangerous. A chill ran down her spine. Something felt wrong, though she couldn't quite say what. She slowly stepped back from the door, her mind racing through possibilities. Maybe he was lost. Maybe he needed help. But there was an unease in her chest she couldn't ignore. The stranger knocked again, harder this time. Emma's pulse quickened. She took a deep breath and tried to steady herself. "Who is it?" she called through the door, her voice calm but firm. There was no answer. Only silence and the faint sound of wind rustling through the trees. She felt a rising fear, the kind that prickles the skin and makes your stomach twist. Her mind began to imagine the worst. She thought of all the stories she had heard about break-ins in small towns, about people taking advantage of those who lived alone. Emma knew she had to protect herself. Her parents had taught her never to panic, to stay in control, and to think clearly in dangerous situations. She moved to the kitchen, where she kept a small emergency kit, including a flashlight and a few tools that could help if she ever needed to defend herself. Her hands shook slightly, but she forced herself to breathe deeply, trying to calm the rising tide of fear. Suddenly, the doorknob rattled violently. The stranger was trying to open it. Emma's heart pounded in her chest. She realized now that this was not a simple visitor. This was someone dangerous. She grabbed a heavy pan from the kitchen counter, holding it tightly as a makeshift shield. The man broke through the door before she could stop him. The door slammed against the wall with a force that made the house shake. In the chaos that followed, Emma tried to push him back, yelling for him to leave. But he lunged toward her, and in the struggle a gun went off. The sound was deafening, echoing through the small rooms. Pain exploded in her side, sharp and terrifying. She fell to the floor, the pan slipping from her hands. Her vision blurred, and the world around her seemed to tilt and spin. Every breath was agony, and she felt a cold, creeping fear that she might not survive. As she lay there, the darkness of pain mixing with the fear of the unknown, a thought struck her. This was her home. She had always believed it was a safe place, a place she could control. And now, in one terrible moment, it felt like everything she loved was under threat. But even in that fear, a small spark of determination remained. She refused to give up. She refused to let this moment define her. She knew she had to fight, even if she didn't know how. Time seemed to slow. The sound of the stranger's movements grew distant, muffled by the ringing in her ears. Emma focused on breathing, on staying awake, on keeping a tiny thread of consciousness alive. She tried to remember the small tricks her parents had taught her in moments of danger. Stay calm, focus, and wait for help. Somewhere in the distance, she heard the faint sound of hooves on the dirt road. Relief and hope flickered within her, though she couldn't yet see who was coming. And then, a shadow appeared at the edge of the doorway. It was a figure moving with purpose, a sense of urgency in every step. Emma couldn't make out the details, but she felt an instinctive trust, a tiny hope that help had arrived. She clung to that hope as tightly as she could, willing herself to stay conscious, willing herself to survive. Her life had changed in an instant. The peaceful evenings, the quiet walks in the fields, the simple routines she had cherished, all of it seemed distant now. But in the midst of fear, pain, and uncertainty, Emma discovered something new about herself. A resilience she had never known, a courage she didn't realize existed. And as the figure moved closer, a part of her believed that maybe, just maybe, she wouldn't face this moment alone. Emma's vision was still blurred from the pain, but she could now see the shadow more clearly. It moved quickly, with a sense of determination that made her heart race. The figure was a man, tall and strong, wearing worn leather boots and a faded hat that shaded his face. He looked like someone who belonged to the land itself, a cowboy, as if he had stepped out of one of the old stories her grandmother used to tell. There was something calm about the way he moved, even in the chaos of the moment. The man knelt beside her, his voice steady and gentle. "Stay with me," he said. "You're going to be okay." His hand found hers and held it firmly. The warmth of his touch sent a small wave of comfort through Emma. She clutched it tightly, as if holding on to hope itself. Every instinct in her body told her to panic, to scream, to curl up and give in to the pain. But the presence of this stranger, calm and focused, gave her strength she didn't know she had. The cowboy quickly assessed the situation, his eyes scanning the room for any sign of danger. The intruder had fled, leaving only the shattered door and the evidence of struggle behind. Emma's mind raced, trying to process what had just happened. She had defended her home, but it had come at a terrible cost. She had been shot, and now every breath felt like fire in her chest. Yet here was someone who seemed ready to face the danger of the world with her, someone who would not let her face it alone. The cowboy pressed a clean cloth against her wound, his hands skillful and careful. He applied pressure, keeping a steady rhythm that seemed almost comforting. "You're strong," he whispered. "I've got you, just stay awake." His words were simple, but they carried weight. Emma felt herself fighting to stay conscious, not just because of the pain, but because of the trust she felt in him. She wanted to believe that she would survive this, and he seemed determined to make sure she did. The sound of distant sirens reached them, faint at first but growing steadily louder. Help was on the way. The cowboy kept talking to her, telling her small stories to keep her mind focused and distracted from the pain. He spoke about his life on the plains, about the long hours riding horses under the hot sun, about the quiet nights when the stars seemed to cover the world like a blanket. His voice was calm and rhythmic, and it reminded Emma that life could still be beautiful, even in the darkest moments. Minutes stretched into hours in Emma's mind. The pain was relentless, but the cowboy never wavered. He adjusted the cloth, checked her breathing, and gently guided her into a more comfortable position on the floor. His hands were steady, his presence unwavering. She felt a strange mixture of fear, relief, and gratitude all at once. She had always believed she could handle anything on her own, but in this moment, she realized the true meaning of support. It was not just about strength. It was about someone being there, refusing to let go when the world felt like it was falling apart. Emma's thoughts drifted, despite the pain, to how fragile life could be. One moment everything was normal, peaceful evenings, quiet walks, simple routines. The next, chaos and danger could strike without warning. She thought about all the times she had felt safe in her home, all the times she had believed that her small world was enough. Now, that illusion had been shattered, but in its place was a deeper understanding of the world. Danger existed, yes, but so did courage, kindness, and unexpected heroes. The cowboy continued to speak to her, his voice a lifeline. He asked her about her favorite flowers, about the little dog she had mentioned to him as he arrived, about the sunsets she loved to watch. Each answer she gave was slow, but it kept her alert, kept her fighting. He laughed softly at some of her responses, a warm, reassuring sound that cut through the fear and pain. Emma felt tears pricking her eyes, not just from the pain, but from a profound sense of gratitude. Here was someone who had come into her life at the exact moment she needed help most. The sirens were closer now. Emma could hear the faint voices of people approaching, calling out in concern. She knew that soon she would be in the hands of trained medical professionals, but for these moments, the cowboy was her only anchor. He kept his hand on hers, never letting go, and his presence gave her a small but powerful hope. Even as her body ached and her vision blurred, she clung to that hope, willing herself to fight, willing herself to survive. As the paramedics arrived, the cowboy gently guided Emma onto a stretcher. He stayed beside her as they loaded her into the ambulance, holding her hand through every movement. She felt a strange comfort in his presence, a reassurance that she was not alone, that someone cared deeply enough to stay by her side in her darkest hour. The sirens grew louder, carrying them toward the hospital, and with each passing moment, Emma felt herself leaving the terror of the shooting behind, even if only slightly. In the ambulance, the cowboy continued to talk to her. He told her stories of the town, of the people he had met, and of the wide-open plains that stretched beyond the horizon. He reminded her of the beauty in the world, of the small moments that made life worth living. His words were a steady rhythm in the chaos, a reminder that even in pain and fear there could be hope. Emma felt her mind clearing, the panic slowly ebbing away as she focused on his voice. The journey to the hospital was tense, but the cowboy never let her feel alone. He held her hand firmly, occasionally brushing a lock of hair from her face, his movements gentle and careful. He reassured her constantly, reminding her that help was near and that she would survive this. Emma clung to his words, drawing strength from his determination. She realized that courage was not always about facing danger alone. It was also about finding someone willing to stand with you when everything seems lost. When they arrived at the hospital, the medical team quickly took over, and the cowboy stepped back only slightly, still keeping his hand on hers until she was safely on the bed. He spoke to the doctors, explaining what had happened, and stayed close as they prepared her for treatment. Emma felt a wave of relief wash over her. The immediate danger was gone, but more importantly, she had not faced it alone. The cowboy's presence had been her lifeline, the one constant in a moment of chaos. As the doctors worked, Emma's thoughts wandered. She thought about the bravery that had brought this man into her life, the kindness that had kept him by her side, and the unexpected ways that life could offer hope. She realized that the world was unpredictable and often frightening, but it also held moments of extraordinary courage and compassion. This realization was both humbling and inspiring. She understood now that even in her darkest hour, someone could appear to save her, not because they had to, but because they chose to. Hours later, after the initial treatment, Emma was resting, her wound bandaged and the pain slightly dulled. The cowboy sat nearby, his hat removed, showing a face marked by years of hard work but softened by gentleness and concern. He didn't speak much now, he just stayed, a silent guardian. Emma felt a deep sense of gratitude. Words seemed insufficient to describe the relief and comfort she felt. This man had saved her life, not just with action but with presence, with care, and with unwavering attention. As she drifted toward sleep, Emma reflected on the events of the evening. The fear, the pain, the danger, all of it had changed her. But so had the courage, the kindness, and the human connection she had experienced. She realized that survival was not just about physical strength. It was also about trust, hope, and the unexpected heroes who appear when least expected. And in this moment, lying in a hospital bed with the cowboy by her side, she knew that she had encountered such a hero. The days after the shooting were a blur for Emma. The pain in her side was constant, a sharp reminder of what had happened, but it was no longer just physical. Every moment brought new emotions, fear, gratitude, confusion, and a strange kind of hope that she could survive and even thrive again. The cowboy Jake, as she finally learned his name, stayed close. He visited her at the hospital, never rushing, never leaving her side for long. His presence had become a constant reassurance, a lifeline in a world that suddenly felt fragile and uncertain. Emma's mind often drifted back to the night of the shooting. She replayed every detail, the knock on the door, the intruder's sudden aggression, the gunshot, and the pain that had ripped through her body. Each memory sent shivers down her spine, but she also remembered the moments that had saved her life. Jake's strong hand holding hers, his calm voice, the way he kept her talking and alert even as she felt herself fading. She realized that while danger could strike without warning, courage could appear just as suddenly, in the form of someone willing to stand by her side. Recovery was slow. Every day brought new challenges. Emma had always been independent, used to taking care of herself, but now she had to rely on others. Even simple tasks, walking across the room, getting a drink of water, brushing her hair, felt exhausting. She had to learn patience with herself, and it was harder than she expected. But Jake never let her feel weak or helpless. He encouraged her gently, celebrating small victories like the first time she walked without assistance or the first meal she could eat without pain. His presence reminded her that progress, no matter how small, was still progress. At times, the emotional weight of the experience pressed heavily on her. She felt anger at the intruder for destroying her sense of safety, fear that something like this could happen again, and sadness for the life she had known before. Jake recognized these emotions, even when she couldn't express them fully. He listened patiently when she spoke, never interrupting, never offering empty words. Sometimes he simply held her hand or sat quietly beside her, letting her know that she was not alone in facing the aftermath. Emma also began to notice small things she had never appreciated before. The warmth of sunlight through the hospital window, the smell of fresh linen, the quiet rhythm of the machines monitoring her health, all of it became a comfort. She realized that life could be fragile, yes, but also beautiful. And in those quiet moments, when Jake's presence was steady and unwavering, she felt a connection that went beyond simple friendship. It was as if they were both learning together how to find light after a dark and frightening night. The town itself became a background in her recovery story. Neighbors came by to check on her, bringing meals, flowers, and words of encouragement. She was grateful for their concern, but it was Jake who had become the anchor. The way he stayed by her side, day after day, showed her that courage and compassion could come from the most unexpected places. He didn't just offer help, he offered hope, and hope was something she desperately needed. Emma's dreams during this period were often vivid and troubling. She dreamed of the intruder returning, of the shooting happening again, and of losing everything she had fought to protect. But she also dreamed of the plains, of riding horses with Jake by her side, of walking through fields of wildflowers under the sun. These dreams reminded her that her life was not defined by a single moment of fear, but by the strength she found to keep moving forward and the people who chose to help her along the way. One afternoon, as she rested in the hospital room, Jake brought a small bouquet of flowers he had picked himself. They were simple daisies and wildflowers, but Emma smiled, touched by the gesture. "For you," he said softly, handing them to her. A little reminder that life goes on. She held the flowers close, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. It was a small act, but in her fragile state, it carried immense meaning. It reminded her that beauty could exist even after tragedy and that she could still find moments of joy. Jake also encouraged her to talk about what had happened. At first, she found it difficult to speak. The memories were too raw, too painful. But slowly, with his gentle encouragement, she began to share her fears and feelings. She spoke about the moment she was shot, about the fear she had felt, and about the overwhelming sense of helplessness. And Jake listened, never judging, never rushing her. His support allowed her to release some of the emotional weight she had been carrying alone. As Emma's physical strength returned, she began small exercises to regain mobility. Jake often helped her, guiding her carefully, offering steady hands and reassurance. They would walk slowly down the hospital corridor, sometimes talking, sometimes in comfortable silence. Each step was a victory, each small movement a reminder that she was reclaiming her life. The process was long and tiring, but it taught her patience, resilience, and the importance of accepting help when it was offered. The emotional bond between Emma and Jake deepened during these days. They shared stories of their pasts, their dreams, and their fears. Emma learned that Jake had grown up on the plains, accustomed to hard work and long days, but he also had a gentle heart and a quiet wisdom. He spoke about the lessons he had learned from life, about the value of courage and the importance of kindness. Emma listened, inspired by his perspective, realizing that even in the darkest moments, people could shine light for one another. Emma's perspective on life began to shift. The shooting had forced her to confront her own vulnerability, but it also revealed the strength within her. She saw that courage wasn't just about defending oneself. It was also about trusting others, allowing connection, and accepting help when it was needed. She realized that vulnerability did not mean weakness, and that healing was as much about emotional recovery as it was about physical recovery. Jake's patience and dedication had an effect on her that went beyond gratitude. She started to see him not just as a protector, but as a partner in rebuilding her sense of safety and confidence. His presence reminded her that life could still be beautiful, that people could care deeply, and that even after tragedy, there could be moments of light. One evening, as the sun set over the horizon and the hospital room glowed in soft orange light, Emma felt a small but profound sense of peace. The pain in her body was still present, but it was manageable. Her mind, once clouded by fear and trauma, was beginning to clear. And beside her, Jake's calm presence reminded her that she did not have to face the world alone. Together, they had endured fear, chaos, and pain, and together, they were beginning to move forward. Emma reflected on her journey so far. She had faced one of the scariest moments of her life, and yet she was still here. She had survived, not just because of her own courage, but because someone had chosen to help her to stay and to fight for her life alongside her. That realization gave her hope, strength, and a new appreciation for the resilience of the human spirit. She understood now that even when life seemed uncertain, there were people who would rise to meet you, offering courage and care when you needed it most. In the days that followed, Emma continued to regain strength, both physically and emotionally. She learned to walk further, to breathe easier, and to trust the world around her once more. Jake remained by her side, not as someone imposing, but as a constant, supportive presence. Their connection grew, rooted in trust, care, and shared experiences. Emma felt gratitude she could hardly put into words, and a deep respect for the man who had become her anchor in a moment of crisis. By the end of this period, Emma had not only survived the immediate danger, but had begun the process of reclaiming her life. She realized that survival was not just about avoiding harm. It was about finding hope, building connections, and embracing the strength that could arise even in the darkest times. And she knew, without a doubt, that Jake had been a crucial part of that journey. His courage, patience, and kindness had helped her to face her fears, to heal, and to see that life could still hold beauty, safety, and even love. The days turned into weeks, and Emma's recovery continued slowly but steadily. Each day brought a new milestone. First walking without assistance, then climbing the stairs of her home with care, and finally beginning to return to some of the routines she had once taken for granted. The physical pain in her side had lessened, but the emotional journey was far more complex. She found herself thinking about the night of the shooting over and over, reliving the fear, the shock, and the sudden intrusion into her peaceful life. Yet with each recollection, she also remembered Jake, the cowboy who had come into her life when she needed help most. Jake remained her constant companion throughout this period. His visits were steady and comforting, not overwhelming but always present. He encouraged her to take small steps forward, celebrating every success, no matter how minor it seemed. If she felt frustrated with herself, he reminded her that healing was a process, that patience and self-compassion were as important as strength and courage. Emma began to realize that her life had changed in ways she could not have imagined, but with Jake by her side, she felt capable of facing this new reality. One afternoon, as the spring sun poured through the windows of her home, Emma found herself sitting on the porch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the world outside. The garden she had so carefully tended before the shooting was still there, though neglected for weeks. The flowers drooped slightly and the weeds had grown tall, but the familiar beauty of her home brought her comfort. Jake sat beside her, quietly watching her work. He had spent the morning helping her lift a few flower pots and trim some branches, careful not to strain her recovering body. "You've done an amazing job bringing it back to life," Jake said, his voice soft but proud. "Just like you." Emma smiled, feeling warmth in her chest. His presence was steady and grounding, a reminder that even after fear and pain, life could still hold moments of calm and happiness. She realized how much she had relied on his support, not just in the immediate danger, but in the quiet days that followed, when rebuilding her confidence and sense of safety had been just as important as physical healing. During this time, Emma also reflected deeply on the nature of courage and resilience. She thought about the night of the shooting, about how quickly life could change, and about the strength it took to confront fear head-on. She realized that true courage was not about never feeling afraid. It was about moving forward despite the fear. She had faced a moment of danger alone, yes, but she had survived because she had accepted help, because she had trusted another person to stand by her when the world seemed chaotic. Jake encouraged her to speak openly about her feelings, and she slowly began to do so. They talked about the intruder, about the fear that had gripped her, and about the relief she felt when help arrived. She admitted her lingering anxiety about returning to her home alone, and he listened patiently, never dismissing her feelings. He reminded her that acknowledging fear was not weakness, and that taking steps to regain confidence was a sign of true strength. These conversations became a vital part of her recovery, helping her to process the trauma and rebuild her sense of security. As Emma regained strength, she also began to reconnect with the outside world. She visited local shops, spoke with neighbors, and even went on short walks through the fields that had once been part of her daily routine. Each step outside her home was a victory, each interaction a reminder that life could continue beyond the shadow of that frightening night. Jake accompanied her on these outings at first, offering support and protection, but gradually she found herself walking with a little more independence. It was a slow process, but Emma recognized its importance. Healing, she realized, was not just about physical recovery. It was about reclaiming her life, piece by piece. One evening, as they sat by a small fire in her backyard, Emma spoke about the lessons she had learned. "I never realized how much I depended on myself until I couldn't," she said quietly, "and I never realized how much courage it takes to accept help too." Jake nodded, understanding. "Courage isn't always about fighting alone," he said. "Sometimes it's about letting someone stand with you when you need it most, and you've shown both kinds of courage." Emma felt a deep sense of gratitude, not just for his words, but for his unwavering presence. Emma also found herself reflecting on the fragility and beauty of life. The shooting had reminded her that life could change in an instant, that everything she had taken for granted could be threatened at any moment. But it had also shown her the power of kindness, courage, and human connection. She thought about the strangers who had come to help, the paramedics, the neighbors, and, most importantly, Jake. She realized that even in moments of fear and chaos, there could be light, and that light often came from the compassion and bravery of others. During her recovery, Emma began to make small changes to her home. She repaired the door that had been broken, reinforced the locks, and cleaned and organized the rooms with care. These actions were symbolic for her, a way of reclaiming her space, her safety, and her life. Jake helped with some of the heavier tasks, but he also gave her the space to take control of her home again. Each nail hammered, each surface cleaned, was a step toward reclaiming normalcy, a quiet victory that reinforced her growing confidence. Emma's emotional growth was just as significant as her physical recovery. She began to see herself in a new light, not as someone who had been victimized, but as someone resilient, capable, and alive. She learned to appreciate the small joys of life, the warmth of the sun, the smell of flowers, the sound of wind through the trees, and the quiet moments shared with someone she trusted deeply. She discovered that happiness could coexist with the memory of fear, that gratitude could grow even after trauma, and that strength was not measured by independence alone, but by the courage to accept connection and care. Jake's role in her recovery also began to take on new dimensions. Their relationship was evolving, rooted in trust and shared experiences. He had saved her life in the literal sense, but he had also helped her heal emotionally, teaching her lessons about resilience, patience, and the value of human connection. Emma found herself relying on him not just for support, but for understanding, for laughter, and for companionship. His presence reminded her that life could be beautiful even after tragedy, and that bonds formed in moments of crisis could grow into lasting, meaningful relationships. The weeks passed, and Emma slowly resumed her routines. She returned to tending her garden, watching the flowers bloom and taking walks through the fields. Each day brought new confidence, and each step reinforced her sense of strength. She understood that recovery was not a straight path. There were setbacks and moments of doubt, but she faced them with a determination she had not known she possessed. Jake remained by her side, celebrating her successes and encouraging her through challenges, a constant reminder that she did not have to face the world alone. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset over the plains, Emma reflected on the transformation she had undergone. The shooting had been a moment of terror, a night that could have ended in tragedy. But it had also been a turning point, a catalyst for growth, courage, and new understanding. She realized that life was fragile, yes, but it was also resilient. People could rise to meet challenges, offer support, and create hope where there had been fear. And in her life, Jake had become the embodiment of that hope, a living reminder that even in darkness, light could appear. Emma's thoughts turned to the future. She knew that the memory of the shooting would never fully disappear, but she also knew that she had the strength to live beyond it. She had learned to face fear, to accept help, and to trust in the goodness of others. She had learned that life could be unpredictable, but that resilience, courage, and compassion could guide her through the most difficult times. And she had learned that love and connection could arise from the most unexpected circumstances, bringing warmth and hope into a life that had once been shadowed by fear. By the end of this period, Emma felt a profound sense of accomplishment and peace. She had survived the immediate danger, faced her fears, rebuilt her confidence, and rediscovered the beauty in her life. The bond she shared with Jake had grown deeper, rooted in shared experiences, trust, and mutual respect. She understood that recovery was not just about healing the body, but about nurturing the heart, mind, and spirit. And she knew that, no matter what challenges lay ahead, she had the courage, support, and resilience to face them. The months following Emma's recovery passed quietly, yet with a sense of meaning and renewal that she had never experienced before. Life had returned to a semblance of normalcy, but the memories of the shooting and the days of pain and fear lingered, like shadows that stretched across the edges of her heart. They were reminders of a night that could have ended differently, a night that had changed her life forever. And yet, as she sat on the porch of her home one spring morning, watching the sunlight dance across the fields, she felt a calm she had not known before. She had survived, she had healed, and she had learned lessons that would stay with her forever. Jake had become a constant part of her life, though not in a way that felt intrusive. His visits were steady, often bringing small gifts like a basket of freshly picked wildflowers or a loaf of bread he had baked himself. Sometimes they would sit in companionable silence, listening to the wind rustle through the trees, watching the clouds drift lazily across the sky. Other times they would talk, sharing stories, dreams, and quiet laughter. Emma realized that the bond between them had grown stronger than she had ever anticipated. It was built on trust, shared experiences, and a deep understanding of each other's hearts. Her home, once the scene of danger, had become a symbol of resilience. Emma had repaired the door, reinforced the locks, and cleaned the rooms meticulously. She spent hours in her garden, nurturing the flowers that had survived the weeks of neglect. Each bloom, each green leaf, felt like a small triumph. Her home was no longer just a shelter. It was a testament to her courage and determination. She had fought to protect it, and now she was rebuilding it, not just physically, but emotionally and spiritually. One afternoon, Emma and Jake decided to take a walk through the fields behind her home. The sun was warm, the air filled with the scent of wildflowers and fresh grass. Emma moved carefully, her steps steady but deliberate, mindful of her still healing body. Jake walked beside her, offering support when needed, but also giving her space to walk independently. They spoke about small things at first: the birds in the sky, the sound of the wind, the patterns of the clouds. But gradually their conversation turned deeper. "I never realized how much courage it takes to keep going after something like that," Jake said softly, glancing at her. "You've been through so much, and yet here you are, stronger than ever." Emma smiled faintly, a mixture of gratitude and humility in her expression. "I wouldn't have made it without you," she admitted. "Not just that night, but all the days after. You stayed, even when it must have been hard." Jake shook his head, his expression gentle. "It wasn't hard. It was the right thing to do, and besides, you're incredibly brave. You fought to protect your home and yourself. I just helped you stay on your feet." As they walked, Emma reflected on the lessons she had learned. Courage was not about never feeling fear, it was about moving forward despite it. Strength was not measured only by independence, but also by the ability to accept help when it was needed. Trust was fragile, yet powerful, capable of saving lives and mending hearts. And compassion, both given and received, had the ability to transform the darkest moments into something meaningful. Each realization strengthened her resolve, filling her with a quiet confidence that life could continue, even after tragedy. Returning to her home, Emma noticed the garden in full bloom. The flowers swayed gently in the breeze, a symphony of color and fragrance that seemed to celebrate life itself. She knelt to tend a patch of daisies, feeling the soil between her fingers, and was struck by the symbolism. Just as these flowers had survived neglect and bloom again, she too had endured hardship and was flourishing once more. The thought brought a smile to her face, and a sense of peace that was deeper than anything she had felt in months. Jake joined her, kneeling beside her to help with the heavier tasks, though she insisted on doing most of the work herself. "You've really made this place beautiful again," he said, brushing dirt from his hands. "It's like it's alive in a new way, just like you." Emma laughed softly, touched by the sentiment. "Maybe it's not just the flowers," she said. "Maybe it's everything we've been through, the hard parts, the scary parts, the times we thought we couldn't keep going. It all brought me here to this moment." Jake nodded thoughtfully, understanding the depth of her words. As the days turned into weeks, Emma found herself embracing life in ways she never had before. She began to take small trips to nearby towns, visit the market, and even attend local community events. Each venture outside her home was a victory, a demonstration of her growing confidence and trust in the world around her. Jake was often by her side, though sometimes she went alone, knowing that she could face the world independently, yet with the lessons of resilience and courage she had learned firmly rooted within her. The bond between Emma and Jake deepened further during these times. They shared meals, laughter, and long conversations about their hopes and dreams. Emma learned more about Jake's past, the years he had spent on the plains, the challenges he had faced, and the simple joys that had shaped him. In return, she shared her own story, not just the terrifying night of the shooting, but her childhood memories, her passions, and her fears. Their connection grew into something profound, built on mutual respect, shared experiences, and the unspoken understanding that they had each played a pivotal role in each other's lives. One quiet evening, as the sun set in brilliant shades of orange and pink over the horizon, Emma reflected on the journey she had undertaken. The shooting had been a moment of unimaginable fear, a night that could have ended in tragedy. But it had also been a turning point, a catalyst for courage, growth, and understanding. She realized that life was unpredictable, sometimes frightening, but also filled with opportunities for hope, connection, and transformation. She understood now that even in moments of darkness, people could choose to rise to the occasion, to help, to protect, and to inspire. Emma's gratitude for Jake grew with each passing day. He had saved her life in the literal sense, but he had also helped her rebuild her spirit, restore her confidence, and rediscover the beauty in everyday moments. She felt a deep appreciation not just for his actions, but for the quiet strength he had shown, the patience he had offered, and the unwavering support he had provided. It was a bond that went beyond words, rooted in shared experiences, trust, and the knowledge that they had faced fear together and come through stronger on the other side. As spring turned into summer, Emma returned fully to her routines. She tended her garden, walked through the fields, and cared for her home with renewed purpose. Each day was a celebration of life, a reminder that she had survived and grown stronger. She had learned that recovery was not a single event but a journey that required patience, courage, and the support of those who truly cared. And through it all, Jake had been her companion, her protector, and her friend. One afternoon, as they sat on the porch watching the clouds drift lazily across the sky, Emma spoke quietly. "I've learned so much these past months. About life, about courage, and about what it means to survive. I feel different now. Stronger, I think, and more aware of what really matters." Jake smiled gently, taking her hand in his. "And you've earned every bit of that strength," he said. "You faced danger, fear, and pain, and you didn't give up. That's something most people never learn." "You're remarkable, Emma." Her words and his presence reminded her of how life could shift in an instant, and how the people who appear during moments of crisis could change everything. She thought about the night of the shooting, the fear she had felt, and the way Jake had held her hand and stayed by her side. That single act of courage and kindness had not only saved her life, but had shaped the way she viewed trust, hope, and human connection forever. Emma realized that life was precious and fragile, but also resilient. She had been given a second chance, and she intended to live fully, appreciating each moment, nurturing relationships, and embracing the world with gratitude. She knew that challenges would continue to appear, but she now had the strength, courage, and support to face them. Life had taught her hard lessons, but it had also given her the gift of hope, companionship, and renewed purpose. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of pink and gold, Emma felt a deep sense of peace. She had survived the night of fear, recovered from the pain, and learned to embrace life with renewed courage and understanding. She looked at Jake, whose calm presence had been a constant through the darkness, and felt gratitude that went beyond words. Together, they had faced the worst, and together they had found hope, strength, and the possibility of a bright future. Emma's journey had transformed her. She was no longer just the quiet woman who lived alone in a small town. She was a survivor, a woman who had faced danger and emerged stronger, wiser, and more aware of the beauty and fragility of life. She had learned that courage came in many forms, that resilience was built in the smallest victories, and that human connection could light even the darkest moments. And most importantly, she had learned that even after fear and pain, life could be lived fully, with hope, gratitude, and love.